This is the Curtiss P-40 Kittyhawk. Throughout the world today, there are perhaps 4 still flying. This is the only one in Australia. All the more remarkable when one considers that it spent 12 years buried in a hole in the ground in Alberta, Canada. The man flying it is Cole Pay, a crop dusting pilot with an enormous number of flying hours, both legal and clandestine. In the same way that other men collect stamps or antiques, Cole Pay collects classic fighter aeroplanes. As well as the Kittyhawk, he owns a Spitfire, a Mustang, and a number of other machines, either flying or about to fly. This film is about the Kittyhawk, an aeroplane which achieved glory almost by default. The Kittyhawk, overweight, underpowered, but more importantly, over here. And in 1942, it was just about the only aircraft that could meet the Japanese on anything like equal terms. It was a heavy aircraft, but it was a very stable gun platform. And in North Africa, it was flown to glory by one Australian squadron, who downed something like 100 aircraft for the loss of only 16 P-40s. As one American general put it, it was damned by words, but it was flown to glory. Even at the outbreak of World War II, the Kittyhawk was obsolete. But although large numbers for the P-40 were placed by Britain and France, it was the Americans who first achieved success with it. These are the pilots of Claire Chennault's Flying Tigers. They flew the P-40 against the Japanese in China and Burma.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, come on. You can do it. Yep.
The Tomahawk is an earlier version of the Kittyhawk with 2.5 machine guns in the nose firing through the air screw. The armourer is wearing a pith helmet, standard issue for the Americans as well as the British in 1942. The Shark's teeth were synonymous with the Flying Tigers, but the Aussies had them first in North Africa. Later models of the P-40 had 6.5 machine guns, all mounted in the wings. The AVG flew bravely in Burma, but finally had to withdraw in the face of overwhelming Japanese odds. Australia first used the P-40 in North Africa, first the Tomahawk and later the Kittyhawk. The RAAF received nearly 850 Kittyhawks, as well as Tomahawks, which Australian pilots flew with British squadrons. This batch of Kittyhawk 1As were originally destined for Britain. That's why they still have the British-style roundels. These pictures were taken in Victoria in 1942, before the aircraft were rushed into battle in New Guinea against the advancing Japanese. Pilots who flew the Kittyhawk are still loyal to the aeroplane, even though it was obsolete at the start of the war. They liked its big, well-laid-out cockpit, a bit like an American car. Some kitties even had a starter button which you pressed with your foot. Several Australian pilots became aces in the desert campaign, although the dusty conditions took their toll of the aeroplanes. At any one time, only 1 in 3 aircraft was serviceable. The Kittyhawk was no good high up, but excellent in the ground attack mode, especially when used as a fighter bomber. There were other emergency fighters supplied to Australia by the Americans. One of them was the Bell Airacobra, seen here in American markings. Australia received 22 Airacobras from the US, but their lack of a supercharger limited their performance at altitude. The famous Hurricane came to Australia as well, but although flown by Australian pilots in other theatres of war, the Hurricane was rejected in favour of the more advanced Spitfire. The P-40E model, owned by Colin Pay, has no connection with Australia. Many air forces use the P-40. This one is Canadian. It saw no active service, but was used as a trainer to introduce pilots to the type. When Col Pay bought the plane in 1982, some of the restoration work had been done. The fuselage had been finished, but the wings, which had been resparred, had not been attached. Electrical wiring still had to be carried out. The plane was missing its engine. Col Pay swapped a propeller from a Mustang for a V12 Allison 1710 of 1,295 horsepower. Some other modifications were made before the aircraft was to fly. The gun sight was removed, as was the 70-gallon fuel tank, which was usually behind the pilot. This meant that a second seat could be fitted.
Okay, I'll just start it. I mean, about 8 minutes. Okay, just keep it coming down. Okay.
June 1988, and the day when the fuselage and the wings are mated for the first time.
Okay, down.
The fuselage is supported on jacks and the resparred wing offered up to it.
This hole's just disappeared from the top.
This one's disappeared.
I've got about a third of a hole showing.
All right, keep going there.
Unlike the Spitfire, the Kittyhawk's construction is relatively simple. All the main sheet metal work on the aircraft had already been carried out before it arrived in Australia. These bullet-shaped steel rods are hammered into the holes where the wings are attached to make sure everything lines up accurately.
You might just have to go up a bit. I've got a bit of rubber cord there. All right.
The undercarriage is checked. The Kittyhawk's main wheels have an unusual operation, turning through 90 degrees before they lock into place. August 1989. The Kittyhawk is pushed out of the hangar for the first engine run. This engine has never run before. It's been stripped and reassembled, all the seals checked, and its 24 spark plugs replaced. Even after 45 years, it shows no reluctance to start. Now it's a question of looking for a steady oil pressure, checking gauges, and looking for any leaks before the big day. The day when this aeroplane flies again for the first time in nearly half a century. A week before Christmas 1989, the Kittyhawk stands ready to fly, flanked by the Spitfire and the Mustang. In the aviation world, this is a big day. A DC-3 load of enthusiasts flies into Scone's tiny airport. It's not often that such a large aircraft, itself a classic, makes it to Scone. The word has gone out in Scone too. This is the latest old plane to emerge from the Pay hangar, which he calls his toy shop. Among the passengers, a number of old Kittyhawk drivers from North Africa, New Guinea and Northern Australia. More pilots flew the Kittyhawk than any other fighter type in Australian service. Cole climbs aboard and begins the pre-flight checklist familiar to thousands of wartime pilots. Undercarriage is locked and down. Stick well back. Set altimeter to 750 feet, the height that Scone is above sea level. The radiator shutters are opened, so the engine gets the maximum cooling effect. The twin-piston hand pump is operated to pressurize the hydraulic lines. Master switch on. Fuel on. Tank selector switch to main fuel tank, 55 gallons. Rudder trim 2 inches right for takeoff. Elevator to 0. Set throttle. Mixture to run, auto rich. Magnetos, both live. Primer switch, 3 or 4 flicks. Clear prop and start engine. The plane is satisfactory. Colpay taxis out and lines up for takeoff. In the air, the Kitty shows the aggressive lines that endeared her to fighter pilots of 23 countries. The Canadian colours are perhaps unfamiliar to Australians. This camouflage scheme of dark earth and dark green was designed for colder climates, but even so it blends well into the green paddocks of Scone. This plane once flew in Anchorage, Alaska. Colpay is using maximum concentration, flying in formation with the camera ship. One hand on the throttle, the other on the stick. But this is a precious aircraft, so he rarely flies it at full throttle. Economical cruise speed is about 230 knots, although the Kittyhawk is good for about 350.
We never use full throttle. We always keep the speed, well within the limits. Not because I'm worried about the aeroplane falling to pieces, but I'm worried about overstressing the engine and things like that, So we only use about 3/4 of the normal power on takeoff because the Air Force don't supply me with new engines, so I want it to hang around for a long time. I hope these things will be flying in another 200 years' time.
I miss your footsteps out in the hall. Heartache and tear will soon disappear.
I just try to fly fairly well and go as well as I can and put on a good exhibition for the crowd so they get their money's worth when they get on air show.
You'll find them there by your favorite chair. Books you love best, contentment and rest when you come home again. Every night I sit alone by the radio, waiting for the news that says it's all over and so we'll soon say hello to little angels asleep upstairs. Both think of you when they say their prayers. They miss you like me, how happy we'll be.
The first flight lasts no more than 10 minutes. Then the Kittyhawk returns to an appreciative crowd.
Come home again.
On the ground, this machine sits higher on its wheels than wartime aircraft because it's not carrying the full weight of guns or a full load of fuel. Neither does it have armour plating for the pilot. As with most tail dragger aircraft, the visibility isn't good while taxiing, so Colpe looks from side to see where he's going. This is what everyone had waited 7 years to see. The flight of the Phoenix, a bird which rose not so much from the ashes, but out of the ground. When you look at it now, Colin, and you think about it being in a hole in the ground a few years ago, does it strike you as being amazing that you got it in the air?
Well, it's amazing that one of these aeroplanes actually did come out of the ground, isn't it? All the stories.
I'm still not quite sure I believe that. It's a true story, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm getting the photos of where they dug it up.
How did it handle today?
Oh, quite well. A couple of little problems, but no, nothing major.
Well, how does it compare to the Spitfire, if at all?
Oh, well, it rolls better. The aileron control was more responsive than the Spit or the Mustang.
Yeah, and what about landing and taxiing?
Oh, it seems to have found the ground pretty well, I don't know.
It's got a wider track undercarriage, though, hasn't
It's wider, not as wide as the Mustang, but it's wider than the Spit, yeah.
So
it's no trouble on the ground, no.
Yeah. So just a little bit of cosmetic work and that's it?
Oh, it's just a few minor details to fix up and it looks right to go then.
Looks like you got yourself a Christmas present.
Oh, well, something like that.
There's a number of old fighter pilots present, notably Wing Commander Bobby Gibbs, formerly commanding officer of No. 3 Kittyhawk Squadron. In North Africa, Gibbs' squadron accounted for 200 German and Italian aircraft. Bobby is one of the more colourful pilots, but it's many years since he's driven a Kitty.
How many years is it since you've sat in one of these things?
45.
45 years?
Yeah, that's all right.
You did most of your flying in Kittyhawks, didn't you?
The bulk of my operational flying in Kitties.
Yeah.
Some in Spitfires, mainly Kittyhawks.
And you actually picked up a fellow flyer in the desert, didn't you, once, and you sat on his lap and...
Yes, we threw away the parachute. He clambered in, and I sat on top of him. I'm just wondering how the devil we did that, but I think probably I was fitter then. I was able to get further forward. I had to get pretty well forward, and of course sitting on him elevated me a bit, so made it possible.
While you were doing that, the Germans were actually coming over you and attacking you?
Oh no, nothing exciting like that. But we were fairly near an enemy aerodrome, where he'd just kept up being shot down.
Not going above it?
But I had some of my airplanes flying overhead, threatening anything that looked like coming out after us. But we were within gun range, and
Must be close to
I was unhappy.
What is it about the Kittyhawk, you think, that, of the aircraft you've flown? What are the Kittyhawk's special qualities?
Well, it's firstly a very rugged airplane with a 6.5. It had wonderful firepower, I think ahead of the Spitfire firepower. Flown properly, it's just as manoeuvrable as a Spitfire. You won't find many of the Spitfire pilots to agree there. But if it's flown properly, it'll turn with the Spitfire. Rate of climb is not as good as a Spit, but without divers, a Spitfire, and without dive a Messerschmitt, which was very, very handy.
But you're rather fond of the Messerschmitt as well, aren't you?
Yes, I have flown Messerschmitts, the F and the G, and they were nice airplanes. I only wish we had had them instead of the Jerrys. But no one offered me any.
Messerschmitt's concept was to put the most powerful engine then available in Germany into a very light monoplane airframe. But ironically, the first Messerschmitt flew with a British engine with the Rolls-Royce Kestrel. This one has the Daimler-Benz DB 605 engine of 1,475 horsepower with fuel injection. The 109 was produced in greater numbers than any other piston-engine fighter aircraft. The cockpit, as you can see, was very cramped. The forward vision was negligible. And yet, in North Africa, the Kittyhawk did surprisingly well against the 109. Low down, it was extremely manoeuvrable. High up, it wasn't really any good. But the Messerschmitt always dictated the terms of battle. With its superior speed, it could always just run away. In 1942, Bobby Gibbs commandeered a Messerschmitt 109G, which had been abandoned by the retreating Germans. Two Messerschmitts were parked side by side on the airfield in Libya. One was beyond repair. The other needed only a canopy and repairs to the stabilizer. The ground crew engaged the starting handle to wind up the flywheel. Then Gibbs took the aircraft off in a cloud of dust. The Nazi insignia had by this time been overpainted with the letters CV for 3 Squadron. Gibbs flew the aircraft 4 times before being ordered to hand it over to the British in Cairo. Kittyhawk pilots in North Africa often found themselves with strange bedfellows. This is a wrecked Italian Caproni Ghibli, a twin-motor reconnaissance plane. The radial fighter causing all the amusement is the Makisaita. This also flew against the Kittyhawk, although not with any notable success. The Fiat CR-42, also captured by 3 Squadron, a highly manoeuvrable biplane, but a troublesome aircraft to fly because the throttle controls worked in reverse. The changing fortunes of war meant that the front line was often ill-defined, to say the least. In retreat, the Germans and Italians left behind huge graveyards of wrecked aircraft. 110s, 109s, Junkers 88s, Italian Savoia Marchetti 79s, Macchis and Fiats. But out of this heap of corroding aluminium, only one complete aeroplane survives today, and that is the Messerschmitt flown by Bobby Gibbs. "49 years after it was found, that very aircraft, the world's only flyable 109G, rolls out from the hangar at Benson in England. It's taken 8 years to get this plane flying again, and there to see it on this proud day are the 2 men who found it. Bobby Gibbs, now 74, and Ken McRae, who's 80.
It shone out like a toy. It was beautiful. It's nice and silver and grey. And it didn't have a canopy. A little bit of damage around the tailplane. So I said, this is for us.
The Luftwaffe are here too, in the person of Generalleutnant Schlitz of the new German Air Force. The cockpit is a tight fit for a 6-foot General.
No, it's not. You see, with a cloth helmet, you'd be all right.
Throughout the world, there are a number of Spanish-built 109s flying, powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin. But this aircraft is authentic, not just the only 109 in the air, but the only German aircraft to have seen any combat. Bobby Gibbs regrets the day that he handed the aircraft over to the British for evaluation. He had planned to ship it back to Australia as a spoil of war.
I took it up one day and carried out some mock attacks on my squadron.
They would have liked that.
Well, they didn't much. They knew I was there, and I just wanted some of the new boys to see what a Messerschmitt looked like. I carried out 3 or 4 attacks, and each time I could have shot one of the boys down. And I thought, well, this is going to demoralize the poor coots, so I gave that away.
What do you think of the job they've done on the aircraft?
Quite magnificent. And, the only thing I'm upset about is they named the pilots who were going to fly it, and they forgot my name.
The team of restorers have scoured the world for authentic instruments. Many of the originals were souvenired after the aircraft arrived in England. Everything on this aircraft works, including the leading-edge slats, a design feature borrowed from Handley Page, which popped out to give better control at low speeds. The engine is still the original DB605, fitted when the aircraft was built in Leipzig in 1942. Firing through the spinner, a 20mm cannon with the breech protruding into the cockpit. The canopy, extremely heavy to lift and hinged at the side, it offered poor visibility compared to the Kittyhawk. If the plane came to rest upside down, the results were usually fatal because the pilot couldn't get out. The 109's undercarriage, narrow track with the wheels flared at an angle which makes it difficult to land and take off. There were problems with this first flight. One wheel dug into the soft earth, slewing the plane around, and the tips of the propeller hit the ground, bending them. The 109 is a mean-looking beast on the ground, but sleek and purposeful in the air. Small wonder that many German pilots preferred it to anything else. If the 109 was the Kittyhawk's foe in the desert, the Mitsubishi A6M Type O, otherwise known as the Zeke or Zero, was its deadly rival in New Guinea and Northern Australia. The secret of the Zero's success was in its turning circle. The tips of its wings were twisted up at the rear and down at the front, so that it could fly at a high angle of attack. It could fly fast enough, but more importantly, it could lose that speed very rapidly. The only advantage that the Kittyhawk had was that it was faster in the dive. The Zero was a different sort of beast. It wasn't a particularly fast aircraft, but in the dogfight it could run rings around any of them. It only weighed about 2 tons, about half the weight of the Kittyhawk, and Kittyhawk pilots were told, on no account do you dogfight with the Zero. You get up high, you use your weight and your speed, and you come down in amongst them, which was something that the Kittyhawk pilots used to great effect. They discovered that in some circumstances, the Zero's tail would actually drop off. For example, they'd come down in a dive, push the stick forward, and then push it even further forward. The Zero pilots would try to follow them, and the tail would literally fall off.
Big Japanese raid.
The technique of steepening the dive was used by this man, Wing Commander Dick Cresswell. Cresswell accounted for 2 Zeros in this way without firing a shot. Was the Kittyhawk really outclassed by Zeros? In the turn, certainly.
It depended upon the height. If Zero could fly between 25 and 28,000 feet quite comfortably, we couldn't. Our sort of the Kittyhawk operational seating was good at 22,000 feet. Above that, it started to wear down very rapidly. The last Japanese raid on Milne Bay was mid-April. I think about 130 aircraft, different types of aircraft, came in, bombers escorted by the Zeros, and the dive bombers that they call the Val dive bomber. Anyway, we hit the main bomber force head on. And I got a bomb, I also got shot down at the same time.
Did you come down in the water?
No, I landed quite comfortably with about, on about 6 of the 24 plugs at Livingston, and I flew that night, chasing bombers that night.
Back on the ground, all is not quite right with Colpay's aircraft. The engine's running too rich, so engineers Mark Wallace and Peter Pring Shambler adjust the fuel pressure. Like most high-performance propeller aircraft, the Kittyhawk overheats if it's run for too long on the ground. The oil temperature mustn't exceed 95 degrees. This aircraft's not fitted with its original oil cooler. It uses one from a DC-4 airliner. Later, Colpay will fit a small spray bar to spray water into the radiator to assist in the cooling. In the air, it's even easier to see the engines running rough. It leaves a black sooty trail just like a jet.
Even 45 years ago, Australian ground crews were used to working on Allison engines in the open air. These pictures were taken at Nom 4 Island in Dutch New Guinea. The aircraft are late-marked Kittyhawks of 75, 76, 77 and 78 squadrons RAAF. The huge backing plate to the aircraft spinner is being manhandled into place. Ground crews worked in makeshift sheds which offered some protection from the heat. That might mean servicing and installing the aircraft's 6.5 machine guns or arming it with bombs. The Kittyhawk was never designed as a fighter bomber, but Australian crews modified it to carry first a 250-pound bomb and later a combination of bombs up to 1,000 pounds. This 500-pounder is having its detonator installed in the nose cavity. Then it's offered up to the bomb release mechanism on the aircraft's centre line and the fin is installed. There was no way of aiming the bomb. You simply aimed the plane at the target. Crude though this was by today's standards, the Kitty bomber did well in the desert and in the southwestern Pacific. Kittyhawks frequently shared their airfields with a variety of bomber types and often accompanied them on missions. These are Douglas Bostons of the RAAF. Occasionally they escorted the Americans as well. These are B-25 Mitchells of the US Army Air Corps. The mighty Beaufighter, described as 2 engines followed by an airframe, also kept the Kittyhawks company. It had better range and firepower than the Kitty and was devastating in shipping attacks. The island of Numfa in Dutch New Guinea, 1943, home to the Kittyhawk but also the team who fixed them, No. 2 Repair and Salvage Unit. Aircraft were frequently cannibalised and parts made or modified on the spot. By this stage of the war, most Kittyhawks were sporting white tails, so that they wouldn't be mistaken for the Japanese by trigger-happy anti-aircraft batteries. Aircraft had their own, more personalised insignia as well. The Kittyhawk's great triumph came in the battle for Milne Bay in New Guinea, where the Japanese attempted an amphibious landing. It was here that the Kittyhawk came into its own, bombing and strafing ground targets. A new word was coined, Kitty bomber. But on the rudimentary airfields of the Southwest Pacific, accidents were frequent, especially on landing or takeoff. This 77 Squadron Kittyhawk had a collapsed undercarriage and will need a new prop. When the power was opened up, the Kittyhawk could swing on takeoff. Or a tyre could burst on the less than perfect runway surface.
Also in a Kittyhawk, didn't you?
Sir John Gorton was flying a Kittyhawk at Milne Bay when his engine cut on takeoff.
Took off, you know, just off the ground. Towards the end of the runway, and she fell back, and there was a lot of mud and stuff in front of the runway. So she flew on, and I hadn't had time to pull the wheels up or anything because she's just off the ground. The wheels went in, and she went over on her back like that, and had a full tank of petrol. And I was pretty scared, particularly when there's some soldiers nearby, and they came and started belting on the top of the place just where the petrol is in order to let me out. So they thought, I don't know what they'd have done, but they didn't. I yelled out to them, and I somehow or other got out of it.
Did you hurt yourself?
No, didn't hurt myself at all.
That's extraordinary. And you came down on top of the Perspex canopy, I think, did the aircraft was upside down?
Yeah, but I was well strapped in.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I was waiting to see if it was catch on fire. I just remember that very strongly. But I just busted some of the side of the window and crawled out. I was a bit thinner then.
By 1943, most Kittyhawks operating in the Southwest Pacific were looking the worse for wear. It wouldn't be much longer before they were replaced by newer types like the Mustang. By the end of the 1940s, most of them were gone, either broken up for scrap or used for target practice. A lot of Kittyhawks never got out of their boxes and ended up as saucepans. Kittyhawks were sturdily built and could sustain an astonishing amount of battle damage. Cannon shells took away part of the elevator of this aircraft, but it still flew home. Wherever they taxied, Kittyhawk pilots didn't go anywhere without 2 members of the ground crew sitting on the wings to show them the way. Darwin, Northern Australia, 1942. The Japanese attacked the town in force, and the RAAF does not have a single modern fighter aircraft on strength. A formation of Japanese Betty bombers flies over the town, but they're too high for the flak to reach them. Often the bombers had dropped their bombs before the fighters got up to them. The fire below is at the Club Hotel near Darwin Oval. This Japanese pilot wasn't so lucky. His Zero was shot down by machine gun fire near Darwin. The gunner who got him received the military medal. The pilot was buried in the makeshift grave at the site, surrounded by the wreck of his plane. Only the Americans had a modern plane to meet the Japanese. These are the pilots of the 49th Fighter Group who flew early Kittyhawks in the defense of Darwin. During the first Darwin raid, 7 American pilots were shot down and a handful of Kittyhawks destroyed on the ground. Later, the Americans returned the compliment. Here, Lieutenants Reynolds and Moorhead and Captains Hannon and Kaiser examined their score on part of the tail of a Japanese aircraft. The truth was that until the arrival of 3 Spitfire squadrons in 1943, the Americans constituted the air defence of Northern Australia. Ironically, Australia did have P-40 squadrons, but they were under the control of the RAF in North Africa, leaving the Americans to handle the Japanese, play interminable games of volleyball, and meet the local marsupials. In between, there was posing for photographs in front of their favourite aeroplane, although occasionally even that tended to wear a bit thin. Colpay was only a child when the Kittyhawk was flown in earnest. Why does it matter to him that they keep flying
I know
today?
you've always said to me that it's just another aeroplane, which is very irritating. If it's just another aeroplane, you could have bought a Cessna.
Not, well, the Cessna hasn't quite the performance, you know.
Does that mean to say that you don't think it's just another aeroplane?
No, well, not really.
40 years down the track, and 3 famous fighter aircraft return to RAAF Williamtown. The entire Colpay collection is here: the Kittyhawk, the Spitfire, and the Mustang. There's a few more modern shapes too: the FA-18 Hornet, and a comrade from the Soviet Union, a Polish-built 2-seat MiG-15. The MiG is the first privately owned Russian jet in Australia and is one of a batch of 8 brought to the country. This was the wild card in the pack during the Korean War. Small, manoeuvrable and heavily armed, it proved embarrassingly good against the early American and British jet fighters, even though it was powered by a Rolls-Royce jet engine. For a reunion of old fighter pilots, this has to be a day of propeller planes. A golden opportunity then to get 3 classic fighters in the air at once.